1, 2, 3, fuck it.
Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel, and today I'll be showing you 7 most common mistakes that we make when we are just getting started with watercolors. Now these are the mistakes that I got to know about recently, and I did that for a long time. So if you guys want to know what mistakes I made when I started out with watercolors, do watch this video till the end. And yeah, let's hop into the video. So the first common mistake that we make is that we make too dark outlines. Now watercolor is a transparent medium, so when we paint dark outlines with watercolors, they see through and they do not look good. So it is better if we use lighter outlines rather than using dark outlines. Now in any medium, it's very important that we use lighter outlines rather than dark outlines because it makes the painting look more realistic. Now one other hack that you can use a watercolor pencil rather than a normal graphite pencil, because when we use water on watercolor pencils, they blend in, so you won't see any harsh lines. Now you can make dark outlines if you want to go over it again with a fine liner or a pen. It's a good practice that you use lighter outlines rather than using darker outlines. Now the second most common mistake that we make is that we do not work in layers. Now watercolor is a medium that is transparent, so we need to make layers to build up the depth that we want in our painting. Now if you try to build up the layers in the first layer itself, it will puddle up and it will not look very good. It will all look messy and you don't want that with your painting. So it's better to be patient and work in layers. Now if you are really impatient like me, you can use a blow dryer or hair dryer to make the layers dry faster. So yeah, it's better that you work in layers rather than making the painting in the first layer itself. Now layers are good because you can build up the depth that you want in your paintings, but you try to do painting in the first layer itself, you won't be able to create any depth, because when we are working in layers, you have the control if you want to make any part more darker or you want to keep it as it is. So yeah, work in layers. The third most common mistake that we make is that we don't allow our previous layers to dry. Now when we don't let the previous layers to dry, you won't be able to do the proper detailings that you want, because the color will start blending out and it will look a lot messy rather than if you let the layers dry completely. Now if you are impatient like me, use a hair dryer to let the layers dry more faster. Now what happens when you work with wet layers is that the colors tends to get muddy. Now you don't want that with the paintings, so yeah, it's better that you work on dry layers. Fourth most common mistake that we make is that we use too much water or too less water. Now what happens when you use too much water is that it keeps dripping around, and if you use too much water, puddles will start forming, and if you use too less water, you won't get the proper finish. And now dry brushing is better if you want to make some textures or make grass or fur like that. So it's good if you want to do some texture, but otherwise it is very important that you use the correct amount of water. Okay, so if you use too much water, there will be puddles around. Now dry brushing is good if you want to make textures. So if you don't know what the correct amount of water is, when you apply water on the watercolor paper, just make sure that it leaves a glossy finish to the paper and do not forms any puddle. So that's the correct amount of water that you want to use, and not use too much water or too less water. So the fifth most common mistake that we make is that we use dirty water. Now what happens when we use dirty water is that you do not get bright and vibrant colors. The dirty water makes the colors muddy. Now if you want to avoid this, what you can do is you can use 2 glasses of water rather than using 1 glass of water. Now when you want to wash the paint of the paintbrush, you use the first glass of water. Now then, to make sure that the paint is completely out, use the second glass of water to clean up the brush thoroughly. Now the sixth most common mistake that we make is that we use poor quality paper. Using the correct type of paper when we are working with watercolor is very important. Now if you're using printable paper, what happens is that the color will bleed through the paper and the paper will turn all blobby and wavy and puddles will start forming, and also the paper won't be staying wet for a longer period of time, so you won't be able to blend the colors together. So it's better that you use a good quality watercolor paper. Now you don't have to go for high-end brand watercolor paper. You can use a good watercolor paper that is around 300 GSM, and you can get it from any local stationery store, but just make sure that the watercolor paper is quite thick enough. So it's very important to use watercolor paper rather than printing paper, because also when you try to blend the colors on a watercolor paper, the watercolor tends to stay wet on the watercolor paper for a longer duration of time, so it gets easier for you to blend the colors properly and make gradients. Now at the same time, if you try to do that on a regular printing paper or any paper that is not thick enough, what will happen, the paper will start crumbling or the puddles will start forming. So yeah, it's better that you use watercolor paper rather than using any normal printing paper or any sketchbook paper. Now the last most common mistake, that is the seventh mistake that we make, is that we do not pre-mix our watercolors. Now it is a good practice to pre-mix our watercolors, because if you don't do so, it will not end up with a good finish, because the layers will start drying out, and by the time you mix up the colors and then go back and start blending it out, the previous layer will be already dried up, so you won't be able to get that desired finish. So it's better that you pre-mix your colors before starting with the first layer itself. So yes guys, these were the 7 most common mistakes that we make as a beginner, that I made as a beginner. So if you found this video helpful, please like, share and comment down below, and do let me know if you want to see more videos like these in the future. And yeah, hope you like it, and see you soon.